Hey, Rebel Rouser. I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. So, here's the thing. I guess probably the best place to start with this is that in Solo a Star Wars Story, we got to see a character that looked very much like one of the Tognaths that we saw in Rogue One, a Star Wars Story. And if you remember Edrio Two Tubes from there, he is somebody who is part of Saw Gerrera's partisans and has an eggmate, as they're referred to, named Benthic. Well, it turns out that there is a character in Solo, a Star Wars Story, the official guide, or at least who's listed in there from DK Publishing, named Tubes, and he is also a Tognath, and it looked very much like it might be Benthic, and so the fact that it just said Tubes and it wasn't Benthic and it didn't say Edrio Two Tubes or anything like that, well, it was really exciting to see the possibility that the character was connecting Solo, a Star Wars Story, and Rogue One when you actually saw the character in the movie. And, to see what we saw in the Solo official guide, well, that seemed to dash the hopes a little bit. Well, it turns out that there is good news in that regard. John Kasdan responded to somebody on Twitter and said that, yes, in fact, the character that is showing up in Solo a Star Wars Story, who is part of the Cloud Riders, Enfys Nest's gang, is Edrio Two Tubes, in fact. And there was an intentional purpose to draw a connection between Enfys Nest and the Cloud Riders and Saw Gerrera and the Partisans and the burgeoning rebellion against the Empire. And what's more is that he was supposed to have a speaking part in Solo, a Star Wars Story, and unfortunately it ended up on the cutting room floor. But that was to have helped create yet another link between the Cloud Riders and Saw Gerrera's partisans and establish the workings of this rebellion, or what might look like the start of a rebellion. Of course, the thing that I'm going to have to go scurrying after now, I'm just looking in that direction because that's where the Star Wars bookcase is here in studio. And, I'm thinking of Beth Revis's Rebel Rise. Wow, let me try that again. I'm thinking of Beth Revis's Rebel Rising and the time that she spent with Saw Gerrera from when she was 8 years old to 16 years old, and see if that happens to have any indication or link to the Cloud Riders, because you know how the folks at Lucasfilm operate, and they like to bury little links here and there between things. So it occurs to me that there might well be a link to the Cloud Riders sitting in Beth Revis's book, and I'm going to have to maybe reach out on Twitter and ask her about it, because that would probably go a little bit faster than going back through the whole book. And I will also say that this then opens up a whole new potential for Star Wars stories. I mean, how the rebellion came to be, how the Rebel Alliance came to be, ultimately was a focus of the Star Wars Rebels animated TV series. We actually got to see the rebellion coming together, and also the break between Saw Gerrera's version of rebellion, his idea of rebellion, and Mon Mothma's idea of rebellion. But obviously there was a lot more activity happening and a lot more factions to rebellion that existed prior to the assembly of the Rebel Alliance. And so we are in a time period in between Solo and Rogue One, and actually I guess technically in between Solo and in between Star Wars Rebels, so between Solo and Rebels, where there's a lot of potentially interesting stories to explore. Now, I'm not going to say for sure or anything like that, but wouldn't it be interesting if the Game of Thrones guys are actually exploring that situation? That would be kind of fun, I think, but, be that as it may. Anyway, by the way, I don't know if I ever mentioned this as a side note, but as far as Indiana Jones 5 goes, and this does make sense, believe me, in the context of Star Wars, David Kopp, who had been writing the screenplay, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Koepp, is no longer working on the screenplay, and in fact, John Kasdan has been tapped to take a swing at the screenplay. So if you thought that, there were any bad feelings about what happened with Solo, apparently not as far as the Kasdans go, because John Kasdan is getting a swing at Indiana Jones 5. So, good for him. And I guess that means, it's a vote of confidence for his work on Solo too. And that's going to do it for today's episode. Over on the audio version, over on sw7x7.com/iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or Overcast or wherever you like to listen to podcasts, I'll do Last Jedi Trivia. I know I had nodded over toward the Star Wars bookcase, but no, it's actually just where I said online. You can hear Last Jedi Trivia there, so do check that out. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.